Today on the show is none other than Brian Fink. Brian Fink is the principal at Rework Group. He's an amazing mentor and friend, a brilliant recruiter, a sourcing mind.
So what has me fired up about the world of sourcing maybe is the fact that people are holding on to the past, right? They're ostracizing themselves, is that they are putting their head in the sand, is that sourcing is one of those functions that is slowly being whittled away by the tooling that we've become obsessed with.
What are your thoughts? Is inbound hiring recruiting?
Full stop. This is sales, okay? Like recruiting is sales. It is sales with a harder product, okay? It has a very skeptical buyer. The recruiter is selling something the candidate didn't wake up that morning wanting to buy. A change in their entire professional life.
Hey, RecOps friends, are you still losing hours every week to interview scheduling chaos? What if you could eliminate the back and forth, cut scheduling time by 90%, and actually get those recruiter hours back on the hiring desk where they belong? That's exactly why teams are turning to Rooster, the native interview scheduling platform built inside Workday Recruiting that finally makes interview logistics fast, seamless, and predictable. With Rooster, you connect directly to your Workday system. No extra tools, no disconnected workflows, and instantly let candidates self-schedule with one-click booking links. It handles time zone and language differences automatically, sends branded confirmations and reminders via SMS, email, or WhatsApp, and keeps interviewers, coordinators, and candidates in sync without constant manual follow-ups. And it's not just about speed. Rooster helps you see the true cost of scheduling inefficiencies with its TAS metric, so ops teams can track and improve the parts of the process that slow you down the most. Whether your team hires locally, globally, or somewhere in between, Rooster cuts errors, saves 10 plus recruiter hours per week, and creates a candidate experience that reflects the quality of your brand. If you're ready to stop chasing calendars and start hiring with confidence, visit rooster.us and schedule a demo today. Your recruiters will thank you. Now, on with the show. What's up, everybody? Today on the show is none other than Brian Fink. Brian Fink is the principal at Rework Group. He's an amazing mentor and friend, a brilliant recruiter, a sourcing mind. Brian, welcome to the show.
Brandon, thanks for having me on the show. I've been wondering when it was going to happen, and finally it happened today, so I'm excited about that. The luck of the Irish is what drove us together because we are recording on St. Patrick's Day.
I love that. What are your parents' names?
I am the favorite son of Steve and Lorraine Fink. I've been voted that consecutively for the past 47 years, and I'm looking forward to regaining the title in 2026 and holding on to it for a 48th year.
You are such a family man, and that's why I asked. One of the first impressions you had on me was paying it forward and honoring the folks that have impacted you. So shout out to Bill and Deb, my parents. I would not be here if it weren't for them. My mom was a nurse educator. My dad was a community banker. And when I hear your endeavors as a father and a family man, I just want to honor the folks that made us who we are to show up in the world with such honesty, integrity, and just joy for life.
Brandon, I really appreciate that, especially considering as my father passed away about 2.5 months ago. It's left a big void at 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm used to having my status update with my dad, and that's a status update that for the past 70 something days we haven't had. My mom is definitely filling in. Mom, if you're listening to this, I really appreciate everything that you're doing to make sure that I am still the king of cold calling and outreach, even though I think Rich Rosen probably gives me a run for the money. But that's where I'm at.
My parents read your newsletter. And it's funny, my dad is retired, but he shows up on LinkedIn because it's just, I think, a habit for him. And he's like genuinely curious about the world of work and people's stories. He always taught me to pay respect to the person that's in front of you. And as I think about conference season, I think about spending time intentionally with the person that you're face to face with. Don't look over somebody's shoulder for who's going to walk by or what's the next conversation. Pay attention to the people that are right there because it's a gift. And I also think about the conference hierarchy. At the very bottom, you have the day laborers that put together the conference. They build the expo hall. They bring out the catering. I've had those jobs. You think about the vendors that show up and put on great experiences. Then you've got this, maybe the influencer, the industry folks, because we get courted a bit. We get to see our friends. It feels like the gang is back together. It's a reunion. You've got the speakers, and then you've got the people at the top making all the money. putting on the show, and pay respect to each level of the hierarchy. And ultimately, how are we bringing up maybe those day laborers and caterers? How are we bringing along maybe some of those sales reps on the vendor side into the practitioner side of things? How can we just bring others along this journey?
Brennan, you bring up an interesting juxtaposition about bringing along other people on the journey. I think one of the reasons that you and I are fast friends is because we understand that we've got to pay it forward to that next generation, right? You talk about being in the banquet hall. Like I started my career as a rush chairman and as a bartender, and those two probably have more in common than they should. But the strong reality is rising up, and how do we bring others with us on that journey, right? Especially now when companies are hemorrhaging talent and their spend for talent is up, even though layoffs are running rampant, which I would argue is a cost to both the employer brand and to the actual bottom line. And it's going to create some disassociation with psychological safety, which is going to ultimately impact those people who have survivor's bias and are going to stay in the org.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think if we continue to choose optimism, we are priming our nervous system to inherently be better connectors. And recruiting is all about connecting. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the future of recruiting that is coming around a corner quickly. Talent engineering. We're going to talk a little bit about operations and rec ops. So let's dive in. What has you fired up today about the world of sourcing?
So what has me fired up about the world of sourcing maybe is the fact that people are holding on to the past, right? They're ostracizing themselves, is that they are putting their head in the sand, is that sourcing is one of those functions that is slowly being whittled away by the tooling that we've become obsessed with. Back when I used to do Recruiting Daily's HRTX event, there was always the question as to how we could do things for free. We've now jumped from the point where we're not just focused on how we can do things for free, but how we can source faster, how we can source more accurate. And there are tools in the marketplace. There are tools like Pen that are definitely delivering that appetite, and they are not suppressing that talent. They're bringing it up to the surface, and they're making more meaningful ways for you to make a connection. Which then I would ask the question, and I got into this with Mikey Wheel. Mikey, shout out to you. I'm a big fan of your Substack as well, is that Mikey brought up in course of conversation today, what is the definition of a sourcer? I think it's not simply a person who finds talent, but they have to make sure that talent is interested, educated, and qualified for the opportunity before they are presented to a recruiter or a hiring manager for that individual to run the course in the recruiting process.
Yeah, I love that. I'm learning. A lot of my journey has been learning in public by the generosity and mentorship of folks like you, folks like Steve Levy, folks like Shannon Pritchett, Jerry Crispin, Glenn Cathy. The list goes on and on, Carmen Hudson. And when I think about some of the work that Glenn publishes on, I have so much respect for Glenn. He is largely not one of us when it comes to the loud, extroverted, cold call anybody type. And I so appreciate his mind because he leads from the heart and he leads with curiosity and intellect. And he talks about that a lot, where it's like, what is recruiting? Recruiting is going out and convincing somebody about an opportunity. And he has a great article that circulated a couple weeks back that I've still been spinning on. And it is this idea of what is the future of recruiting? I personally don't believe inbound hiring is recruiting. I have just had to go out and source candidates directly for the roles I've filled. Even when I've done frontline high volume hiring, I was like literally plucking people out of the produce department at a Whole Foods. I was sourcing the person in the small food desert town that had a yoga practice, that had 10 people showing up to the yoga class, that might be a registered dietitian to be a nutritionist in the store. Like I was headhunting frontline workers. Sometimes what we do is not scalable. So what are your thoughts? Is inbound hiring recruiting?
So I don't think that inbound hiring is recruiting. I think recruiting is the idea of going out and bringing in, right? Now, the employer branders who are listening to this conversation, they may argue with me. They may say that employer branding is really that activity of attracting talent and bringing talent forward into the forefront and making sure that they're engaged with the brand first, and then with the job second, and then with the hiring manager third. I would articulate it's like playing craps, right? Like playing roulette. It's a game. It's a numbers game. And that's why a lot of people call recruiting a numbers game. I'd also articulate that they're not attracting the top candidates to the role per se. I also take issue with the idea that recruiting lacks specificity. And I think that one of the things that Glenn would agree with me on, Glenn or maybe even a Schumacher or what have you, is that you've got the aptitude and the curiosity to find talent at scale. You said it's not scalable. I would argue it is scalable, that there are a lot of different ways that you can source that talent. But I believe that sourcers go out and find that talent, and recruiters are the ones that disseminate or drive that conversation internally. On the activity that could be managed by a hiring manager if you think that if it's that high value of a task, and I would argue that it's not. You could be managed by a recruiting coordinator. Is it that low value of a task? I would argue not. So this does create some difficulty as to where this kind of falls in the life cycle. But I don't think that sourcing is posting a job and hoping or praying that somebody's going to come in. Also, Brandon, one thing that I'd like to point out is that there was an article in Wired magazine, and I would argue that with candidate fraud running rampant, and this is not a scare tactic for somebody to buy a tool like a Testo or something like that, but with this running rampant and inbound candidates not being flagged based on their LinkedIn or their GitHub or originality of an email address, all these different factors that were creating a environment where we're opening ourselves up to systemic risk, especially when we post a remote job or remote role.
Yeah.
I don't think that was somewhere we expected to go today.
We can. Candidate fraud and identity verification are the biggest problems facing recruiters today. If you think about the recruiting remit, whether you're in a team with rec ops, RCs, sourcer, talent partner, director, whatever, or you are a team of one, the reality is today, recruiters are being asked to make a judgment call on if a candidate is who they say they are. There are already stopgaps in the hiring process that do this on our behalf, things like the I-9 verification. We should really just be bringing this into an earlier stage in the funnel. There are ways that this is being tackled today. You shouted out a couple of tools. I think Greenhouse Real Talent does this.
Greenhouse does a really good job with Clear.
The reality is we are asked to prove our identity for far less riskier scenarios than getting a job and having access to company data, company financials, customer data. The risk is super high. We should not be adding to the remit of the average recruiter to jump on Zoom and make a judgment call as to whether or not you are Brian Fink. That is just ridiculous.
I don't disagree with you. I think that recruiters should be focusing on cold outreach. They should be focusing on managing a pipeline, handling objections, negotiating offers, and then closing. I don't know where identity verification comes in that part of the process. I think it's somewhere at the end, but
Yeah. It's crazy. Let's talk about the funnel though, because you said it's not scalable. And I think about some of the ways that I have scaled systems that have anchored to recruitment marketing and employer brand. I've been responsible for media buys, for job ads. I have hired people inbound. I have needed to do that.
Time out. About hiring people inbound and doing media buys, I would argue that when you go, and I'm not trying to prove you right or wrong, but I would argue, Brandon, is that when you go in and you say like geofence that you want to show an ad over a specific area, like you're looking for frontline workers and you want to hire people from Target, that you geofence a Snapchat filter over Target that shows what it would be like to work a day in the life at Aldi.
It's so true. I've got a even more practical example. So I live in like the rural part of the burbs in Denver, and I'm actually like looking directly at the Lockheed Martin facility. And I've told Amy Miller, I will stand out in front of Lockheed Martin with a sign that says, now hiring Project Kuiper for a certain price. But there's another facility on the other side of the highway, and it's literally the same office building. There are two buildings in one office park, shared parking lot, and it's Blue Origin and Lockheed Martin. The same exact building. Like literally the engineers are lined up window to window, looking at each other, arriving the same day in a cleared space at 9 a.m., walking in the parking lot. Like we think about all of the complicated ways to hire and source and identify talent. If I'm hiring in cleared spaces, shout out to a couple of folks in the space, like I will sit in that parking lot. I'll set up a lawn chair. We'll do like floaties and a kiddie pool. What do you want? Let's have a barbecue in the parking lot. Let's go actually meet people and convince them to take a job. Let's not overthink this.
All right. So wait, Brandon, how is that different than employer branding? I have a better hot dog from Costco than they do at Walmart. Like, how is that not employer branding? I want you to defend that.
How is it not employer branding?
Or how is it not post and pray advertising?
Or how is it not post and pray advertising? I think it's the art of the individual. If it's me, if it's you, that's the craft of recruiting. How can I come up with something that is creative enough to get the attention of you, the engineer, as you're leaving the office building to come across and enter in the other building of the competitor? And sometimes it's compensation. Sometimes it's direct manager. Sometimes it's the project. But I think it all comes back to motivation. We don't index enough on the motivation of candidates. We look at what they've done, when they did it, who they did it for, but not what they want to do next. And I think that's the missing piece that cannot be quantified. And that's why we don't talk about it.
So wait, I do talk about that, is that I open every conversation that I have with a candidate and I say, hey, Brandon, look, I've read over your resume. I know who you are. Hey, Brandon, I've read over your LinkedIn profile. I know who you are. Hey, Brandon, I've read over your GitHub. I know who you are. Okay. That's the part that's different. Hey, Brandon, can you give me a 2-minute snapshot about really where you've been and where you're going next? Because I want to index on that next piece. And I want to really understand what why that person has engaged in these past performances so that they can lead, or where they're moving towards, what that horizon is. Let that qualify them as to whether or not they're the right fit for the opportunity. If I'm talking to a product manager and they say, I've been a principal product manager, I've had 3 people reporting to me, I want to move into an IC role, I got to skip in the record there for a second. I've got to deeply dig into the why.
Yeah.
That's recruiting. That is not an inbound job application. That is really piercing the truth and trying to find out what's going on in the ether.
And that's another interesting piece where I didn't expect this conversation to go yet, is underemployment. When we have a market like this that recalibrates, non-technical hires are not seeing 5th to 90th percentile offers the way they were being thrown around in 2023, 2021. So now, as we think about the recalibration, we see layoffs, we see those directors taking IC roles, we see VPs taking director roles. And oftentimes it's a testament to the market. They have bills to pay. They need to take the job they can get a callback for. But also there's that human motivation piece. There are times where maybe you've been a leader and you want to step back into the tactical work. We're seeing a mid-management crunch. So maybe folks are seeing, hey, I make more of an impact as an IC than a senior manager of Yada on a shitty product line in Fink.
So wait a minute. To that, there was a great article in Business Insider the other day where they documented how a manager at Hinge went from managing 3 people to managing 18 people and becoming a mega manager, right? So I would say that's there as well. One thing you touched on, though, is you touched on layoffs and you touched on job hugging. You didn't call it job hugging, but that's where it's at, that they want to stay with the company, but they're willing to take on the IC role. There's another number that's out there that we're not paying enough attention to, and it's 27% as reported by Gartner. That's roughly the average voluntary turnover rate in corporate America last year. I realize that was 2025, and in 2026, we've been dealing with a bloodbath of tech layoffs. But companies are hemorrhaging talent and they're spending 1.5 to 2 times an employee's annual salary to replace those people that were the passive job seekers. People responsible for stopping the bleeding, those are recruiters. And in a lot of organizations, they are just treated like a member of the administrative staff that has a LinkedIn subscription.
It'd be funny. We see that in the AI labs, member of technical staff. Like, what would a member of administrative staff? Just make it sound fun. No, I think about the interesting way we interpret statistics. And sometimes when the market goes through these corrections, there are people who haven't experienced market corrections in the past. So it feels bigger than it is. It feels all doom and gloom. Now we have a lot of conspiracy theorists out there who don't trust some of the labor reports. So it's just a weird time and a weird market. I get it. Like, people have been sold that work should be their purpose and passion. When we ran out of things to sell in the twins trying to compete with large, big tech companies that had quirky culture and great benefits, what did we sell as recruiters? We sold purpose, we sold passion, we sold mission, we sold values, we sold cultural competencies. Now, that shit doesn't really matter. And now millennials are experiencing the fallout from believing a lie that work has to be our alignment of purpose and passion, and that it's going to be all things social to us. The reality is society has a fallout on membership with community, whether it's church groups, whether it's social clubs.
Robert Putnam, Bowling Alone. Got it. What? Brendan, I think that you're bearing a lead in this, though, is that you're not talking about the fact that millennials who went through COVID, who did remote work, that they're isolated at the office. And now that they're being called back to the office, they're not able to find that purpose. It's been sold in a different way. I think if Danielle Farage was having this conversation with us, she would also point to some of the things that are taking place in Gen Z. I think that we would noticeably talk about some statistics that talk about how Gen Z is false starting these jobs, right? Like it's having 90 days on the job and they realize the job isn't for them because they're not in love with it, right? So there are a lot of different pieces that are taking place. And I think that we're having a conversation about all these things that are happening all the time, all at once.
Yeah. And what's interesting too, like we could talk about Gen Z. You mentioned you were a bartender. I don't know, man. I just think like people need to go get a job, go do some manual labor, go get some life experience, go hang out. That's a great one. Go travel. Wait a
minute. Hold on. You say go travel real quick. So yeah, I was a bartender, and yes, I was a bartender that was a corporate trainer for Longhorn Steakhouse. So I used that job to travel across the United States, opening up Longhorn Steakhouses and seeing all these different parts of the country. Yes, go travel, right? But traveling is not in the budget for everybody when they think that it's going to be champagne dreams and Instagram wishes. That's not how the world works, right? Like you've got to discern that grit, that resilience. You've got to get into it.
Yeah, I don't take a lot of vacations. You know this. I've got one coming up that I'm excited about. But I remember,
are we going to Metallica at the Sphere? Are we doing that? Did you get from? Okay.
This episode is brought to you by Rooster. Rooster does automated scheduling for Workday, and the CEO of Rooster, Luke, is a huge Metallica fan. He and I talked about this when I was in Boston on site with him last month, and turns out he's going to be in the Snake Pit with his 11-year-old son who plays drums, and his band plays Metallica covers. 11 years old. That's the thing. Start a garage band. If you're young, go live life. Listen to Metallica. Do something that is not scrolling your phone. Let's go back to the funnel. Inbound versus outbound. I am not a math guy, but I know that great inbound hiring optimizes for 0.5 to maybe 1% conversion rate for a qualified applicant. If I am working a rec and I'm going to fill that pipeline, the numbers I'm looking for, I'm probably going to have I want to shoot for a 70 to 90% pass-through rate with the hiring manager, which means I'm going to have like maybe a 30 to 50% reply rate from my candidates that I outreach, which means I need to have an 80 to 90% email open rate. Like those are just the real metrics. So if we're thinking about
but that sounds like numbers, sales. That doesn't sound like HR, bro.
What would you hang your hat on? If you're going to open your $1,000 MacBook and do some work today, do you want to optimize for 0.5%? Or do you want to optimize for a 50% response rate with a 90% hiring manager pass-through rate? Do you want to be more accountable?
I do want to be more accountable. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy agency land as much as I do. Full stop. This is sales. Okay. Like recruiting is sales. It's not like sales. And I know that I'm going to draw some detraction from like Jerry Crispin and Lars and what have you. It's not similar to sales. It is sales. It is sales with a harder product. Okay. It has a very skeptical buyer. And if you're an internal recruiter, it has a zero commission structure to show for it.
I'm with you.
I want you to think about it. For those of you just fast forwarding the conversation, what does a recruiter actually do? They optimize, they prospect, they cold outreach, they manage a pipeline, they handle objections, they negotiate. I touched on this just a minute ago, but they close. The only difference between a recruiter and a revenue generating AE is that the recruiter is selling something the candidate didn't wake up that morning wanting to buy. A change in their entire professional life. I do not sell software as a service. I'm sure that changes people's lives in new and interesting ways that I cannot fathom. But back to the Glenn Cathy comment that you made at the beginning of the conversation. As recruiters, we are actively involved in helping people select what they're going to do with their time, what they're going to do with their meaningful, purposeful life. And yet we hand recruiters a $70K base and open recs and a stack of tools that don't talk to one another. And we wonder why candidate experience feels like eating glass.
And I think the piece with the difference between sales and recruiting, while recruiting is sales is any sales rep can go through like a coaching process to learn medic or medpic qualification processes. What is the equivalent for recruiting? Human exchange. Understanding the human experience,
Getting
meeting a lot
on
of
the
people.
phone. Why are people afraid to get on the phone?
Dude, I have a missed call from corporate Natalie from 11:30 p.m. the other day. It's like, why is corporate Natalie calling me at 11:30 p.m.? Like, it's just get on the phone.
But Brennan, let's go back to this, is that you asked a question about numbers, right? And this is the dirty truth that companies don't want to say out loud, is that organizations systematically underinvest in recruiting because talent acquisition has an attribution problem. Okay. When a sales rep closes a deal, revenue hits the CRM. It happens in the same afternoon. Click of the button, credit card done, whatever. When a recruiter places a VP of engineering who goes on to build a $200 million product, the credit gets diffused across the org chart until it disappears entirely. And when it diffuses entirely, and I'm going somewhere with this because I want to attack the people who talk about quality of hire, because when there's no attribution, when there's no commission, when there's no recognition, you don't know what the quality of hire was because it's spread out. It's totally diffused, right?
100%.
So this is why recruiting is treated like a cost center, and cost centers get squeezed.
And this is actually why we're not going to see a scalable talent engineering, scalable rec ops system in the way a sales organization does. Sales organizations get shiny new tools and bloated sales stacks because there's a direct correlation to actualized revenue that hits the books quickly. When we take the same concept, because recruiting is sales, and we try to develop these talent engineer type workflows and remits out of the recruiting seat, that is truly just mirroring what is coming out of the go-to-market engineer, which was a job description developed by Clay, the sales orchestration tool, which is super complex. We could get into that. When we borrow this nomenclature from other areas of the business, we're going to see a failure because it's hard to justify the cost of these tools in a way that is not directly tied to the output, which is revenue that hits the books, maybe within 30 days, maybe within 30 minutes. And here's the kicker. The token cost to the AI lab, whether you're using the sales tool or the recruiting tool, is the same. So we're going to see a skyrocketing cost in talent acquisition software once it stops being subsidized. Right now, we are living in token cost subsidization. This is why it costs $7 to cross town in an Uber in 2017, because it was subsidized. The actual cost was $35. Right now, the recruiting software you are buying is a subsidized token cost. Once the other shoe drops, recruiting teams are royally screwed, and it's a wasted effort to chase this whole talent engineering tail so that we look like other areas of the business and are more credible to our science and technology engineering-minded leaders. And here's the kicker. Regular analog recruiting still works. It's not broken.
Oh, I was like reaching for my phone. I'm like, yes, it does work, right? Like making phone calls and sending emails. Brennan, I think you touch on a few different things, like three main themes. One, you're right. The math doesn't lie. McKinsey has been saying for 2 decades that top quartile talent outperforms average talent by 400% in complex roles.
That's the
400%.
80% of the value comes from 20% of the people.
Okay. So your ability to identify, attract, and close that talent isn't a support function. Okay. It's a fucking weapon. It's a competitive advantage. Okay.
Yes.
It is the leverage point that determines whether your product roadmap gets built by A players or just gets warmed over by LinkedIn applause. Okay. That's one. Two, we have this thing in academia where we attach the word science to all these words to get federal funding, right? I have a degree in political science, right? There's consumer science. There are all these sciences where we merged math with something. We merged quantitative with qualitative studies. And qualitative studies, I don't know how you operationalize qualitatively that, historically speaking, that Russia invaded Ukraine. I don't think that's mathematically plausible to do that. I think it's dichotomous. It's a 1 or it's a 0. The reality of it is that this speaks to the fact that companies that get this and that are going analog, that companies like Google that built a recruiting machine that was so sophisticated it had its own research function. Amazon, it treats the bar raising interviews like revenue assets. Netflix famously said their entire HR philosophy is about talent density. And they back this up by paying recruiters what they're worth, right? The rest, they're fucking posting on Indeed and they're wondering why their offer acceptance rate is 45%.
This is actually an interesting point because those are household names. Engineers want to work for those companies anyway. So are those recruiters even recruiters?
I would argue that okay, so wait a minute. Yes, because they're recruiting from one another. Is that, Brandon, when I worked for this company called Twitter, and then it became X, and I worked for both companies. But when I worked for this company called Twitter, we wanted FANG talent. We wanted Facebook, we wanted Amazon, we wanted Netflix, we wanted Microsoft. I guess we wanted manga talent, but whatever. The reality of it is that there's something I want you to internalize here. Is that going to that analog place, the recruiter who gets on the phone with a passive candidate, somebody who's at one of these top tier companies that came out of one of these top tier schools, someone who is comfortable, somebody who's employed, somebody who's not working, somebody who's enjoying their job, and then convinces them to have another conversation, and then another conversation, and then another conversation, and then for them to entertain and offer what it would be like to leave. That person is running one of the most complex influence campaigns in the history of business. They're managing multiple stakeholders internally. They're managing external stakeholders in terms of the candidate's family. They're reading emotional signals. They're reframing risk. They're closing under uncertainty. That's the analog that you're talking about, or that's the analog I think you're talking about. That's not 100%. A coordinator. That's a fucking rainmaker. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think, why people like you are so respected. That's why I like showing up. The best compliment I ever received from a founder was, how are these people in your orbit? And it's like engineers who say, it took me 20 years to be able to solve that ticket in 2 minutes. It's who do you know, the power of the Rolodex. How do you understand how systems are built to extract data from a database to make sure that it is, in fact, corporate Natalie's personal phone that's calling me? I'm motivated by sleuthing. Like, I grew up flipping Jordans. I would buy Supreme streetwear and sell it overseas when you couldn't buy this stuff. This was before Reddit. We had our own forums. How do you think I found rare Jordans online from a sneaker shop in St. Louis? I'd be doing reverse image lookups and querying the internet for the serial number in a database. It's the same for sourcing. When I found out that's how you find engineers, I was so psyched because I couldn't wait to do that. The reality is a lot of recruiters are afraid to source in the same way a lot of sales reps don't want to prospect.
They're afraid to get on the phone. They're afraid to prospect. They're afraid to send that email. They spend all this time writing the perfect email. And I'm not saying AI can do it better. Sometimes it can, sometimes it can't. They got to figure out how to do human persuasion at scale. The market is shifting. I think that AI automation is removing the transactional layer of recruiting. And I think that we had a lot of transactional recruiting when people came into the industry 2020, 2021, 2022. What's left is the hard part. And you identified that. Human persuasion at scale, relationship building.
It's the hard part, but it's also the fun part. You've sourced candidates from interesting places. I remember working my first tech recruiting job, recruiting for a fitness software company. And I was on Strava trying to source folks from Strava. This is before they had the DM function, and doing like reverse image lookups to be like, hey, this person's in this geo. Is that this person? Getting contact information? That's sleuthing. Like, that's the fun stuff. You mentioned Pin earlier. Steve Liu, the founder of Pin, is an internet sleuth. He is a sourcer. He got second place to the guy from Pinterest in the hackathon that Aaron Matthew designed at ERResourceCon. He does the work. You've got to trust people that are building software to love the craft and know the craft inside out. And I think that's something that you have a few tricks up your sleeve. How are you thinking about finding folks? Is it mostly on GitHub? Where are you sourcing the world's best AI ML engineers?
So you mentioned GitHub. Is that one thing that I like to look at on GitHub is who's liking your repositories. I think that Like you could be a 15-year-old founder of a startup. And if Elon Musk likes your code repository or forks your code repository, I would argue that is just as valuable as attending a top 25 CS school, right? If Linux Torvald thinks that you are the shit when it comes to Linux, that's like having 15 years in the trenches, right? So I'm looking for those quote unquote buying signals and validation signals from those influencers in the space, right? So I'm looking on GitHub. I also used to really like Kaggle. I think it's become overcrowded and over corporatized. I really like going down rabbit holes on Instagram. I think there's some unique features that people you can find there. Still big on Medium. I think that there are a lot of people who, especially product engineers, that they give away their secret sauce on Medium. And then the other day, I came across this on LinkedIn. All right. And Brandon, I can send you the link for the show notes. But this engineer posted an article on LinkedIn showing other people how they could get text message notifications through a Twilio API that backdoored or went into the API, the jobs feed API from LinkedIn, so that they could get jobs texted to them that were relevant to what they were looking for.
I love that. I think recruiters need to be more creative and zoom out. Think about how these systems actually work and use data. You and I have talked about a variety of sourcing strategies, but there's no one size fits all. There's no specific playbook. There is creativity that comes to sourcing. And ultimately, it is that outreach. I have been very fortunate to be good at email. I am just an email guy. I love it. I love seeing who I can get to reply to an email. I've told you these stories before, but like DHH replies to my email.
Dude, that's the whole reason I named the company the Rework Group. Okay.
Yeah. Caribou Honig replies to my emails because I worked for a Portco. And it's just think of creative ways to get into people's inboxes with great messaging and authenticity. I love email for a few reasons. My senior year internship, I was writing for a newspaper, running a WordPress blog in 2010, newsletter for a newspaper. I worked for a publicly traded retailer where I ran our customer loyalty newsletter program, 1.3 million subs. The increased open rates directly correlated to sales that got product mix from the customer loyalty program. That data is on public earnings calls. I went and worked at TLDR because I cold emailed the founder to say, hey, I want to help build your newsletter team. We went from 3 million to 10 million by cutting headcount in half and hiring the right folks to do the job. I freaking love email. And here is my trick. Reply to newsletters. Newsletter responses from the newsletter platform distribution will always catch the attention of the sender. It doesn't matter if they are software engineer IC at Meta or DHH, the founder of Ruby on Rails. If you reply to their newsletter, they will see it.
So that's how I knew that your dad reads my newsletter on Substack. I put two and two together. I was like, this is not random. Okay, this is what makes sense here. I want to dial into something that you talked about building the newsletter space, right? Is anybody site:/substack.com space quotation marks at the name of the writer, close quotation marks, and using that to be able to find people at scale? I just thought about that. Like that was a rando. I'm like, that's something I'm going to try in a minute.
I've got it right here in my toolbar. I'll drop the Boolean string into the show notes. I want to go back to something you said about hiring at Twitter and getting attention inbound from the powers that be within a specific niche industry. This kind of reminds me of Google's FUBAR hiring program, where if you submitted a certain query on Google, you would get an invitation to interview with the team. And there was a lot of lore to it, but it was very real. If you're going to demonstrate your curiosity around like a fifth percentile subject, you deserve to get paid a shit ton of money and have the opportunity to prove your skills. How do you think we could borrow like a future version of FUBAR today? Or is it just what projects have you open sourced? Obviously, OpenClaw, company of one, and homie was just out here like shipping on GitHub, getting fans.
So I think there are a multitude of different things that you can do, quote unquote, to find the signal of those individuals that are building at that scale. I go back to GitHub. I think that there are great tools like Google Alerts that you can put, or you can get notifications on whether or not somebody is updating their code base. I think that there are unique features that you can get. And also for those recruiters that are out there that don't know how to read GitHub, I have office hours every Friday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern. They're free. If you just want to get together and you want me to show you how to search on GitHub or read a GitHub profile or dig in that, let's go. All right. Let's get it on. All right. It makes me a better recruiter. It makes you a better recruiter. It elevates our craft. It makes us better when we talk to candidates. But when you think about that, I think that also putting different challenges out into the ether to ask people what they're doing or what they're building. Like, for instance, I really jam hard on Claude code. I don't know how to code. I got a guy on my team. His name is Sid. Sid knows what he's doing, right? But what I do is I ideate there, and then I find somebody who can build off my ideations. But I'm also looking for somebody who can speak to me, not like I'm a noob, but somebody who can have that conversation with me and help elevate my abilities at the same time that they're critiquing, maybe in a harsh light, what's being done. I think that's how you find that empathetic engineer that you talked about DHH. I'll talk about Jason Fried. Jason Fried, his essay about empathy in software engineering and direction. I think these are the ways that you find candidates today, by hooking up a few different APIs to an MCP and going through Claude. You may or may not do that with Apollo. I'm just saying, maybe. Have I shared that with you?
Yeah. We talked about your workflow last week. I haven't seen it in action. I want to. The last stuff I was doing with some of that type of work was running an Apollo, Clay, Zapier trigger with an OBO campaign from a founder I was working with to
Explain
automate
what
email.
OBO is, because everybody knows what Zapier is.
On behalf of, so sending like on behalf of campaigns, hey, I'm running LinkedIn outreach plus email from the same space based on Clay triggers on candidate signaling from a founder's profile. Because sometimes if you're recruiting in a startup, you're going to get higher response rates if you're sending in-mail from the founder's LinkedIn profile or their email. But what we see is always the pendulum shifts of what takes precedence and what is in vogue with candidates. Sometimes it's email, sometimes it's in-mail. And every couple of years, it seems to ping pong back and forth, where it's, email is king, and then in-mail is king, and now in-mails are expensive. So how do we bypass that cost?
Video DM.
Dude, it's great. It's great. Audio DM, people, even like text message. If I send you a voice note, it is impossible for you to not listen to that voice note. And then I can see it disappear. So I know you listen to it. But yeah, I think there's just like more creative ways to engage with talent. And we as recruiters have to be adaptable. If we are in one of those periods where LinkedIn in-mail is working, we need to figure out how to send great in-mail campaigns, or having a really good multi-step sequence so we can get them into email where we may want to have majority of our correspondence. But the reality is finally the ATS has caught up with better caching of those conversations across multi-platforms. This is true CRM work that even a few years ago wasn't as mature. It's largely still nascent, and we're going to see that token cost issue probably kick into gear within the next couple of years. But I'm excited that we finally have tools for stuff that you and I have been talking about and trying to build and piece together with bubblegum and paper clips for years.
Zapier is my friend.
Don't act Zappier than thou.
I like Zapier. Like, I like it. It makes things work for me.
It does. Shout out to Wade. Actually, I got a funny in-mail and Zapier story. Let me see if I can find it real quick. You talk about cold emailing for sport. I saw that Zapier was doing some stuff online, and I emailed their head of content marketing, like just a short email, and his response, "Now this is how you write cold email." Damn, we're all set on video, but you've got me hooked. Got some examples? Sure, bro, I'll send you some examples. It's just send in-mails, have fun, send emails, practice, hone the craft, get in somebody's inbox, make their day.
Take your reps, do the reps. This goes back to what we were talking about with Gen Z. Get out there. If you're talking about grit and tenacity, go out there and get punched in the face. Have somebody tell you this is the worst message I've ever written. And then we talked about Shannon Pritchett. There was a Hire Easy event that I did where I cold messaged developers from finding their information on Hire Easy and then put it in my personal email. and email those individuals and to see what kind of response I would get. And I had people who came back to me and they were like, this is the worst email that I've ever looked at. Why are you asking me for advice on how to write an email? You're a recruiter. You should know that. Get lost. But that's the curiosity angle, to go back and to drive this back to the conversation we were having at the top of the call about Glenn Cathy, is that Glenn is curious. If you're going to be anything as a recruiter, this recruiting engineer thing, don't be a recruiting engineer. Be a recruiting data scientist. Get comfortable with A/B testing. Get comfortable with things like SQL so that you can better yourself, so you can improve those odds, so you can have more at-bats, so you can have more contact with the ball. That's what you need to work on.
And this is the silver lining of the layoffs. And the other shoe dropping is like, who has experienced a layoff with adversity? The next great candidate is always one phone call away. And this is why recruiting needs to be out of HR, is because we think about working ourselves out of a job in different ways. HR's job is like clinging to attribution for impact. HR will always talk about, their manager training, their employee relations practices, their learning and development frameworks. We've all heard the phrase sales fixes everything in a P&L. Better hiring just fixes everything. Recruiters are not afraid to work themselves out of a job. And the recruiters I know that have experienced layoffs from companies have gone on to get more at-bats. They've done great things. They've built upon that resilience. And the silver lining is this: the recruiters that have come out the other side of 1, 2, 3, 4 layoffs are super strong today. They've accelerated their ability to be a strong recruiter in the future, because you can be a decent recruiter and make a living, but what does it take to be great? A lot of at-bats, a lot of different businesses, a lot of different positions to recruit for, a lot of different hiring manager personalities. If you just do rinse and repeat recruiting for the same hiring manager at the same company for 5 to 10 years, you get really good at that. And I just don't think the future of recruiting is going to be as cookie cutter.
I agree with you. I don't think it's going to be as cookie cutter. I think that, Brandon, just a really good salesperson, and to bring this back home, a really good recruiter makes a candidate's life seem like it's going to be measurably better on the other side of a yes.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah.
Let's go back to talent engineer before we wrap.
Talent engineer, yeah, what we came here to talk about today.
Yeah, talent engineer, where does the name come from? If you've seen these job descriptions pop up, talent engineer comes from go-to-market engineer, which is a term and a job title coined by Clay, the SaaS platform for sales orchestration. Talent engineering is all about talent orchestration. An example project would be something like network mapping. So behind the scenes, you take 100-person company and you take all of their networks and you have this node effect of mapping where talent density is. So you can basically automate an employee referral program. Another example would be sourcing those hit lists, understanding talent density comes from X company. Let's go find all the people that worked there during milestone Series A to Series C. Where are they now? Go recruit them. So it's this idea of orchestration, how it ties into the ATS, how it ties into the outbound machine.
I gotta tell you, I think you're jumping too far at Clay for a second, right? Like, Brando, I think to 2015, okay? Laszlo Bock publishes Work Rules, right? Yellow book. Everybody's seen it. If you haven't seen it, and he described Google's people operations function with its A/B testing of job descriptions, its regression analysis, its interview scores, its data-driven approach to retention. That's when I think talent engineering entered the zeitgeist. It's not called that in the book, but I think in its purest form, it's supposed to be those things that suggest that recruiting can be engineered.
In its purest form, it's thinking we can quantify and measure the human experience with numbers. And I think that will probably be the greatest fallacy of people and talent, is thinking that we can chase the tail and figure this out with a new methodology. At the end of the day, what is recruiting? What is work? Why are we doing all of this? If we understand those questions and bring in a little bit more empathy and a little bit more qualitative research that maybe we could borrow from research firms for, say, consumer goods, I think maybe we'll be better for understanding what motivates people. I think what's challenging is then how we measure compensation and advancement opportunities with attention to equity across demographics. And that is probably the reason why we have this quantification piece, or that's at least a piece of the puzzle, which is very important. But I think at the end of the day, when you think about the highest paying companies, these are tech companies. Who runs tech companies? Science and technology, folks that believe in the story of math. They believe in the story of science. So how do we appeal to their sensibilities? Talk to them in the language they understand.
That's an architectural question. How do you design a system that consistently produces the right people in the right roles at the right time with the right development inputs to keep them growing? That is a systemic architectural question. I am not prepared to answer that today.
Neither am I. But what we can answer is that recruiting is sales. A couple other reasons. We talk about like the rec ops movement. Recruiting operations is a name and a job title. So somebody that works in recruiting that doesn't work recs, that is like revenue operations. That's where the name comes from.
Workday implementation experts.
Another one, recruiter enablement. Again, recruiter enablement is a remit of somebody that works in the recruiting department that does not work recs, is not accountable to the outcome.
What the hell does that mean? Recruiter enablement, right? Did you help me make my bed?
Maybe. That comes from sales enablement, basically like people that work in sales that aren't accountable to quota. And then now talent engineer, which is borrowed directly from go-to-market engineer, which is a job title that we recruit for. I've recruited go-to-market engineers. It's one of the hottest jobs in a sales team. Again, that does not have accountability to quota. So the lesson here is let's stop hiring people to work in recruiting who aren't accountable to filling the. We don't need more layering. We don't need more peers. Get out of the way and let me cook. At the end of the day, recruiters are not afraid to work themselves out of a job. Every hire I place in a startup, I want to be better than the last person I placed. The future companies,
yeah,
exactly. The future companies will be 100 people. They will not have an HR department, and they certainly won't have an in-house recruiter. And that's fine because the best recruiters I know don't need to work in-house. And here's the other thing. If you look at the job descriptions of the talent engineer, the job description and the profile they are after is really just the profile of the technical founder of a recruiting sourcing startup today. So if you have these companies just trying to hire an engineer or somebody who can do orchestration with low no-code tools, why would that person take that job instead of going and building a deck, building an MVP in Lovable, and raising $200K on the back of it in a seed round? So I think what we're doing here is just trying to signal to executives like, hey, we're smart too. Hey, we can keep up. Hey, we're forward looking. At the end of the day, recruiting isn't broken and it's about getting to a handshake yes.
Don't disagree with that. Don't disagree with that. I am full on in support of that. But I just want to come back around to this is that the best talent engineers, the people you're talking about who are doing this work, who are building these MVPs, that's the next generation of sourcing.
100%. And if you can do that, why would you do it for $200K and a basis point of equity when you could go to market and do it as an agency and bill $1 million?
Okay. No complaints here.
So anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox because I love bouncing some of these passionate ideas off you. You're an excellent writer. Your consistency with writing, your consistency with mentoring this industry is unmatched. I've said it to every single person. You are the manager all of us misfit recruiters didn't ask for and received. I love you, brother. Thank you.
All right. So about the writing, my first instance with Steve Levy was Recruiting Inferno, was his blog on how to be a great tech recruiter. I went to that blog. I worshiped that blog 10, 15 years ago. I thought that was the gospel truth. In many ways, it is. In many ways, actually meeting Steve Levy in person, because he was the mic runner for a conversation I was leading about how to X-ray LinkedIn. And this was 12 years ago. Steve Levy runs to the front and he catches me and he goes, Brian, I have a question. And I'm like, you're Steve Levy. That's the only thing I could get out of my mouth at the time. I'm constantly trying to give back to the community what Steve Levy, what Steve Rath have given me. And so, yes, I write every morning. It's therapeutic. It is my Marcus Aurelius homage, so to speak. I write about recruiting specifically on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays on LinkedIn. And I may have another venue. I may have another thing coming.
Brian, I love it. That's how I felt when I met you. The first time I met Steve Levy, he put me in a headlock. The first time I saw Jerry Crispin in the flesh, my armpits started sweating and I slapped a recruiting influence on the shoulder. I was like, holy shit, there's Jerry Crispin. You know what they said? Who's Jerry Crispin? That's why we're doing this, brother. Thank you for everything you do for all of us. And I can't wait to wrap my arms around you the next time I see you. Thank you for everything you have done for me in my life, professionally and personally, over the last year.
Party people, let's party.
See you at Metallica. Snake Pit, baby. Here we come.
Let's go.